My name is Andrew Marr. I've been a professional fishing guide now for, this would be my 13th season, uh, doing this up in Saskatchewan. I've done it. I started when I was about 15 up in the Muskokas, running out of a little tin boat, catching smallmouth and rock bass and pike and stuff like that. And it was always a passion of mine. I did ecosystem management at Sir Sanford Fleming. Like out of that, I was selling fishing equipment for a while and eventually realized that I wasn't getting to spend as much time out in the field as I would have originally liked. And I made the leap. And my background was pike. I mean, that's one of my passions is big pike and muskie. And so when I decided to try and look for a lodge to work for, I looked specifically at pike lodges. And I was just aware of Saskatchewan as being sort of the forefront of some of the best pike fishing in the world. And that was what drew me to go out there. Got to be 13 years ago now. And that's just sort of where I started off. And it was really a focus on pike. And over that time, we do a lot of lake trout, walleye, and grayling up there. And I loved it. I mean, it's a pretty cool part of the world. I grew up in Toronto. And I always tried to spend as much time out of Toronto as I could, and working in Saskatchewan as it goes along with that theme. And it's yeah, the fishing is pretty world class, and especially for fly anglers. My concentration in guiding early on wasn't necessarily the fly, and that I've grown that over time. And it's just the experience I've had with it is it's pretty cool, pretty fun. And I don't know, I spend most of my clients now are fly guys. Do a lot of sight fishing. I focus more on sight fishing pike. That's what I really enjoy. So in the presentation tonight, we're going to talk about a few species, but the focus will be some of the pike once we get to that. And yes, that's a little bit about me anyways.
Love it. So yeah, you've got a really great in-depth presentation here that you're going to share with us. So I'll let you share that, get that screen shared, and I'll just kind of throw this over to you. I might jump in here there with a question of my own, and certainly if folks have questions, they'll
yeah, it's just a little under 50 slides. Sorry, hostess, you gotta.
Oh, sorry, you got to throw hosting rights to you. Hang on.
Yeah. This will probably take about an hour. And feel free to ask questions and share my screen here. This one. Oh, hang on, I gotta move some stuff around here. I'm just a fishing guide. I'm not the most technically savvy guy in the world. Here we go.
There you go.
Okay, so I think you could see that now. I'll get us over like that. Oh, I don't know how I hide this. There, sorry. All right, we'll work with that. Okay, so here's, so intro, this is Northern Saskatchewan. I'm going to be talking about the Northern Saskatchewan area, not the South so much. We'll touch on a little bit. Here's a sort of table of contents. Just do a little introduction to myself. I'm going to talk a bit about Saskatchewan and the history of it, the fishing regulations, a bit about lakes and rivers, fish species, and travel and accommodation options. I work at a lodge, but I want to talk a bit about people that want to venture there by themselves or do an outpost camp, things like that, and just sort of what options are available. So we'll dive into it. Here's me. I talked about myself a little bit. But yeah, born in Toronto. I grew up fishing the Muskokas and Georgian Bay, French River, Lake Huron. I mean, the Muskokas, Georgian Bay, there's big pike in those lakes. And I know I grew up catching bass and things like that. And the first time I ever saw a big pike come up after a lure, I was like, I want to catch that. That's a big fish and I want to catch that. And I was kind of hooked after that. But I've done a lot of muskie and rainbow. You know, I live up in Southampton on the Saugeen here, so obviously catching some rainbow trout. And I own and operate a website called pikeonthefly.com. I'm not currently selling anything on there, but if anybody was looking for a resource for fly fishing for pike, that's just a little thing I've got going there. It's got a few articles and just some videos and stuff. I appeared in the common thread, which was entered into the 2020 fly fishing film festival, so it got all over North America and Canada, and it won a few awards and was received pretty well. So that's a little bit about me. And Saskatchewan, so brief history, geography, and just a few notables. Let's see if I can move this over here a little bit more. There we go. So there's a picture of Saskatchewan. So it's been inhabited since about 9,500 BC. So the recession of the last ice age, when you had people cross the Bering Strait. That's when people started coming into North America, and people settled in here. And historically, you know, just some of the native groups, the Cree, Lakota, Dene, they're still found there to this day. Up a lot of the northern settlements are native. So that's who lives up in the north there. And the name of Saskatchewan, it was after the Saskatchewan River, and the Saskatchewan River would be kind of flows down in around this area, but that's where the province gets its name. You know, 1690 first explored. It's 1.1 million people. This is very sparsely populated, and once you get past this line, I mean, this is all farmland down here, but once you get past this line going north, there's almost nobody up there. There's a lot of fish, but not a lot of people. And you've got 100,000 lakes and rivers in that province. You know, so if you got 1.1 million people, you put one on each body of water, you'd have 10 people on every body of water in there. So there's a lot of room to go find a place to go fishing.
That's great.
Obviously, it's you know, agriculture's all down in here is their mainstay, but that's just a little bit about the province itself.
That's cool. So I think when people think of Saskatchewan, they probably have that farming kind of belt in mind more than anything, right? It's just wide open and flat. How would you describe, for somebody who hasn't seen it before, might not be familiar, kind of that northern stretch of the province? Would you describe it as anything like we have here?
I'd say the biggest, so I mean, the first time I ever went there, I flew into Saskatoon, and that's still where I fly. And if you've ever driven through Saskatoon, you've driven down through the farmland prairies. And I didn't necessarily know what to expect as I was going north, but once you get up into this area, it's actually like, this is dead flat. This is you know, see your dog run away for days. But you get up into this boreal forest up here, and it's quite rolling. I'd say the amount of sand surprised me. There's a lot of sand up there. Like the lake, I'm up on Wollaston Lake, which is here.
Mm-hmm.
And there are just beautiful beaches all over the place. That's one of the things that surprised me most, and it's not dead flat by any stretch. It's pretty rolling, very glacial. We have big esker. There's glacial deposits. There's a lot of eskers, and we'll fish those. But an esker is where a glacier went through, and it leaves a deposit. And they almost look like, it almost looks like a worm mound sort of, and they can go for 80, 100 plus miles. And there's some that start on shore, and they go under the lake, and you can actually follow them with a fish finder, and you can see these ridges go under the lake down 80 feet of water, and then it pops back up on land and keeps traveling. Pretty different from Ontario. I mean, it's like, in terms of the forest, if you got up to Lake of the Woods area, it has a bit of a similar feel, but I don't think there's anything really in Southern Ontario that quite I could kind of relate it to in terms of forest or.
And even
like
Northern
that.
Ontario sounds a good bit different still.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but far more similar to that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep going here. And yeah, I thought it was important. Thought it was important to show the Saskatchewan flag. And I could go back at one screen here. Well, I'll show you this, but we'll go back to it. But the whole idea behind the flag, and I'll go back a shot, but it really is representative of what the province is. I mean, we're talking about the grasslands in the north, and that's what the two colors represent. It shows the southern agricultural fields, and then the north is that the boreal forest. I'm just gonna go back a screen. So there, so you can see right here. There's your northern boreal forest. Here's your farm fields. That's what that flag represents. It's pretty interesting. And then the western red lily is the provincial flower. That's like our trillium here in Ontario. But yeah, it's kind of neat. I didn't really know that. That was sort of something I found out when I was researching for all this. And then they have the coat of arms. So keep going. And a couple of things that Saskatchewan is famous for is potash. That's happening down the south. It's a fertilizer. Up in the north, up in that boreal region, is uranium. There's a number of uranium mines where I guide, including as far as I know, the richest uranium deposit in the world is not too far from where I fish at a place called Cigar Lake. That's what they explore. It's a lot of geology. People go up there to look. They're looking for minerals, but uranium's a big one that comes out of Saskatchewan. Down the south, you have some of the Badlands, and they've got T-Rex fossils from out of there. I'm not a particularly big hunter, but the Milo Hansen, the world record typical buck, comes from Saskatchewan. Apparently it's a big one that'll never likely get beaten, but I don't know, that's just one of the things that the guys talk about out there. I'd say the next 2 points from a fishing standpoint should catch your eye. That the biggest lake trout ever recorded and the biggest rainbow trout ever recorded are both from Saskatchewan. That, if you're a trout guy, that should raise an eyebrow. Now the trout, the
areas there, I see.
Oh yeah, the lake trout. Now the lake trout was out of a gill net, but I think I want to say it was back in the 60s or something like that. And both of those fish were triploids. The world record out of Diefenbaker and that Athabasca fish, they're both triploids. So they're non-gender fish, and that's one of the reasons those fish got to that size. And I want to say that the world record of rainbow or the lake trout, I remember seeing it years ago. I think it was 48 inches long by 48 inches around.
Bowling ball.
It was like I mean it's kind of a ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know how that even works, but that's, yeah, it's 48 by 48. I'm pretty sure. And of course, you can't mention Saskatchewan without the Rough Riders. If you know somebody from Saskatchewan, you probably know a Rough Rider fan. They're crazy for it. And they, down, I think the Packers, they call them the cheeseheads. The Rough Riders fans, they put watermelons on their heads. I don't know. I just, yeah, that's their thing. But yeah, they love their football. Okay, so this is the Northern Saskatchewan Administrative District, and I thought this was important to show in this northern region. Saskatoon's quite a bit south here now, so now we're really focusing in a bit here. But you can see there's a few roads that go up here. Like here's Lake Athabasca and Reindeer. You've got a few roads up into these areas, but you notice there's really no community. There's just a few little dotted communities. There's about 70 of them. There's not much up there. It's pretty rugged terrain, a lot of wildlife and fish and lakes, but not a lot of humans.
Would you say what we're looking at is sort of like starting at that dividing line and headed north? Yeah,
this line this is about the Churchill River, and you're gonna see a lot more photos or like angles of that. But yeah, but this is basically the northern FMZ fisheries management zone essentially is what you're looking at here. You know, I'm guiding up in this area, but I mean, all these lakes this is all fishable if you can get to it.
Sure.
Yeah, but just to give you a sense, what is it? Yeah, there's 35,000 people that live up there, and that's a huge landmass. So yeah, there's lots of room to go play up there. Okay, I want to touch on the flora and fauna a little bit. Like I mentioned, it's boreal forest up there. Jack pine, black spruce, and those are the two main ones. And in this photo here, this is from the floatplane at the lodge. This is almost right by the lodge. That gives you a bit of a sense of what the forest is like up there. You got a lot of moss and lichen down there. It's really quite beautiful. But I mean, you don't have big maple and oak. It's nothing like what we have here in Southern Ontario. It's pretty limited number of species up there.
Yeah, doesn't look particularly pleasant to try and bushwhack through.
No, not really. It's it's in Muskie. Like if you look like under the wing of the plane, there's a lot. I mean, that's Muskie. We fish a lot of stuff like that, but I mean, you look at that, like you can't walk on that. You'd sink right through that stuff.
Right.
It's just mud. It's just grass growing on top of mud, basically.
Yeah. So you're not portaging anywhere. This is basically if you want to get in somewhere, you fly in, you drive in, you paddle in.
Yeah.
Not much land-based travel outside of that.
No, not too much. And if you look like some of this moss and stuff down here, I mean, it's if you were to walk into the woods, if you walk on that stuff, that your foot imprint can last years. It's kind of sensitive ecologically. So we have some ATV trails up where I am, but we try not to walk off into the woods for that reason. We kind of try and protect it a bit. But I would say in the fall, you know, so you have the poplar, the birch, and the tamarack, and there's not really a ton of poplar, but so in the fall you do get some nice color up there, but it's all yellow. Tamarack, birch, poplar, they all turn yellow. So you don't have the reds or anything like that. It's but you'll have these big pine forests and some shock yellow. So it is quite pretty. Lots of morel mushrooms in the Labrador Tea. We're often fishing right up against Labrador Tea. It's sort of a bushy, kind of hard to explain. It's like a bush that grows right on the water's edge. Blueberries, you know, so that's just a little bit of the flora that's up there. And the fauna, some of the big animals, this isn't all of them, but moose, caribou. The caribou are pretty cool. That's one of the ones that we don't really get down here in Southern Ontario that you'd ever see. The moose, I would say, it's funny, the moose, some years I see a bunch of them. This past season, I saw 0 moose. But I saw 1 caribou. And as one of the guys said, well, if you saw a caribou, that's worth 10 moose. And in 13 years or so, I've seen 2 wolves. I've heard them lots, and I've seen lots of footprints, and I know that I've driven one way and there's been one walk out behind me because somebody else sees them. But the wolves are pretty standoffish. You might hear them, but pretty rare that you see them, in my opinion. The porcupines, we've had some problems with porcupines where we've stored boats at some of our flyouts and we flip them out, and the porcupines, for whatever reason, like to eat the transom. I guess on the inside there's a little bit of, there's some sort of wood, or there's something on the inside of a transom of a boat, and porcupines like it. They're kind of problematic, actually.
Interesting.
Lots of bald eagles. And the bald eagles are something I'll generally go out of my way with clients in the boat. We probably have 30 or 40 eagle nests charted around the lake, and we often will stop in and go check out the small eagles, and it's polluted with eagles up there. You'll see them all the time. And then it is a major flyway. So in the spring and fall, it's kind of interesting. You can certainly tell when it's starting to get cold up north, because in August you'll start to see all the birds coming back, and you go, okay, well, everything's starting to freeze up in the territories way up in the tundra there, and they're going to get the heck out of there. One funny note I might say is that the first time I ever went out on the lake that I'm on, one of a guide took me out just to show me around where we'd be working. And we came around a corner, and he's been up there for 30 years at this point. And we came around a corner, and there's a flock of white pelicans on the lake. And I look and I said, "Oh, there's pelicans up here." And he looks at me and says, "No, I've been here for 30 years. I've never seen one in my life." But they are, and I've seen a few of them since. And there's some big tundra swans. So, I mean, every once in a while, you'll get some bird that you don't normally see will show up. Like, I don't know, just every once in a while, there's a flock of white pelicans, and you just count yourself lucky that you get to see them, I'd say.
Yeah. Very cool.
So, yeah, we're going to get into the fishing regs here a bit. So there's 3 fisheries management zones, and it's really south, central, and northern. You compare that to Ontario. Ontario has 20 of them. It's, it's maybe just the shape of the province, but it's broken down pretty simply. In this map on the northern zone, this line is probably just a little bit farther north than the Churchill. I think that's changed a little bit, but this is the area we're concentrating on tonight. So, but pretty easy. But just 3 big zones. Or FMZs. And I'm going to move this a little bit just for a moment.
Just so you know, Andrew, only for you, whatever you're moving around there in the cameras. So do whatever you need to do. Close it all if you want.
I don't know how to close. Well, maybe I don't know how to close this thing.
That's all good.
Yeah, it's all right. This I thought was interesting. Just talking about growth rates. So I'm going to go back. So this talks about Reindeer Lake, Lac La Ronge, and Tobin Lake. This one's a bit different, but say we'll go with the Northern Pike here. So this is talking about a 10-year-old fish. So a 10-year-old pike in Reindeer is going to be 25 inches. In Lac La Ronge, it's going to be about 33 inches. And in Tobin Lake, it's going to be almost 40 inches. And I'm going to go back one screen. So keep this in mind here, if I can. Yeah. So when they're talking about that, Tobin Lake it's down in here somewhere. So here, a 10-year-old fish is going to be about 40 inches. Lac La Ronge would be right about here. That's where they're saying it's about 30 some odd inches. And then you get up a little bit and you're talking about a 25 incher. So there's almost a 15-inch difference between the same age year class fish up in this area compared to down south. That just sort of gives you an idea of as you keep getting north and north, about just how short those seasons are compared, when you're talking about down in the grasslands, down in the farm areas where it's a little warmer. As you go north, it's a short growing season. There's ice on that ice can last a long time, but they don't get the pressure, and it's big cold water. So those fish can grow quite big. I mean, the ultimate size of what a fish down south can reach, they may get to 40 inches quick, but then they might slow down and they might not be able to get past that. Versus up in those northern lakes, yeah, that's a slower growth, but their ultimate size can be significantly bigger.
And is that due to lack of pressure, or is it because of the size of the water bodies, or what do you think?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest, or food source.
Or lack of competition from other fishing size?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on the answer to that. I think it has to do with growing season. I mean, yeah, those southern fish can get big, but it's, like you think about southern Ontario, yes, there's some of those warmer bodies of water where a fish can get to a size quicker.
Mm-hmm.
You think of muskie in the Kawarthas versus Georgian Bay.
Sure.
Yeah, those fish in the Kawarthas, they can get big probably a little quicker, but you're not catching 50-pound muskie out of the Kawarthas.
Sure.
Just the food source, or there's things missing. So it takes a certain, cocktail or the right ingredients to get a really, really big fish.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So keep going here. Yeah, this is the FMZs. And that's just the three areas we were talking about. North, south, and central, and the dates of when they open. May 25th to April 15th. So where I am, and I'll touch on it, our season starts on June, it used to be June 10th, we're June 9th now, and we go to August 21st. It's 73 days where I guide. And that's just because we can have ice. I've seen ice into July in places up on shore. So if you're ever considering going up there, up into the north, like May 25th, everything could be under several feet of ice still. And then some years it's wide open. Generally, the smaller lakes will open first. Like we go up in the float plains to go check it all out, but you might have the big lakes are still frozen, and they really kind of thaw from the outside. So all the little bays around the outside edges where the waters come, you have rivers coming in and everything, it all sort of melts from the circumference, from the outside, and then the last little bit is the middle. So in some years we've had to push back dates, but yeah, that's just sort of when they open, and they open by, it's just the date. They don't break it down by species like they do here in Ontario, and that might be that it's not as a diverse number of species in Saskatchewan as it is in Ontario. So you think of a lake in Ontario, you might have to, they have to consider, okay, when the pike spawn, then when the lake trout spawn and the muskie spawn and the largemouth spawn and the perch, you have all these different species that they're trying to manage. Whereas Saskatchewan, it's a little bit more limited, and they just do it by date. So if you want to go fish up in FMZ3, May 25th, have at her. That's just, they manage that a little bit differently than Ontario. And you always, again, just I got a note there, you always just got to check local regs and stuff like that to double check, but it's a little bit different than Ontario. And here are the species. This is straight out of the government of Saskatchewan. And I broke this down a little bit between the southern and northern species a little bit. The only ones I would say here, so on the northern species, yeah, grayling, burbot, lake trout. The upper Iron, we don't have sauger and saugeye. Those are further south, but we have all these species. The walleye. The perch, there's not viable perch fishing. I've maybe seen a 6-inch perch once up where I am. They just don't get that big, and frankly, there's probably too many pike for them to get that big.
Yeah,
we don't have jumbo perch. We have perch, but nothing too big. But yeah, a bit more diverse, and there's roughly about 21 species that anglers would target in Saskatchewan. But this is where we're looking here, and I'll touch on that again a little bit later.
would you say that all those species are targetable on the fly?
For the northern species, probably not the burbot.
Yeah, the whitefish. Do you have a?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll talk about them. Yeah, whitefish for sure. Yeah, very targetable. Because they stay pretty shallow. But burbot, like, I see a lot of pike. I catch a lot of pike with burbot with tails hanging out of their mouths. It's usually a sucker tail, but when I'm fishing those shallow pike bays, I never see the burbot, but I know the pike are eating on them just because the tails are
Maybe a different time of day or something.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, and they're not very big, but
yeah,
yeah, but yeah, very, very fly fishing accessible up there. So this was just an additional note on on the limits. They have specialized catch and release waters and additional regulations. And I thought this was important to include, and this is what the government of Saskatchewan is doing. So they focus on grayling, lake trout, northern pike, and walleye sauger. So they have, on a lot of their bodies of water, they have a higher regulation limit to those species. Those are really kind of the most important species in terms of the north and what people go to Saskatchewan to fish for. So the government does make an additional effort to protect those. Like, it's very low limit. You can catch a combination of one of these fish to keep. I mean, if you go back one, you look at the limits, I mean, you can catch keep 5 pike or 25 or, 4 walleye in some areas, but you get into these catch and release zones, and they make the effort to manage that as a sustainable fishery. That's something the government has consciously done, is to protect that and promote that. And this is just a little additional map of some of the lakes up north. So here's the Churchill River and L'Orange, and here's really where the boundary is. And this is the northern FMZ. This is zone 3. And if you were to go into their regulations, so say you're looking for a lake to fish, okay, let's say Amber Lake, it's stocked. They stock some lakes. That's in section 9A. Okay, section 9, row A. So somewhere in this area here. And I think they give you the GPS coordinates a little bit. And then that lake is open all year, but then they have CR3. You can see here there's a CR1, and there's different regulations, but quite often like a CR3 is going to be all barbless. Upper eye fish, it's all barbless, or you can use multiple hooks, but it's all barbless. And that's government regulated. That's something that we don't have in Ontario. You could have all the barbs you want, but I haven't had a barb on a hook in 13 years in fishing Saskatchewan. If you keep a bend in the rod, you won't lose any fish. It'll be okay. Okay, I'm going to touch on some of the lakes and rivers up in the area. I'm going to move this a little bit now. I'm going to move this right off the side here for a sec. So we've got one of the biggest lakes in Saskatchewan is Lake Athabasca, and that's when we were talking about that 102-pound lake trout. That's where this came from. It was Athabasca, and that crosses into Alberta. That is the 20th largest lake in the world by surface area, and it's the 8th largest lake in Canada. I think it's about maybe almost, was it? It's 778,000. I want to say it's just about half the size of, I think, Lake Ontario, just to give you a bit of a reference idea as to how big it is. It's massive. It's a gigantic, gigantic lake. The next one is Reindeer. Reindeer's over here just under Canada, and that borders Winnipeg, or Manitoba rather. You've got Wollaston, where I guide. And Wollaston, it's the largest natural bipurification lake in the world, which means it naturally drains out to 2 separate oceans. And I'll touch on that again. But the watershed, so I mean, you have water up in this area. This is going to go out to the Arctic Ocean, and you have water in this area is going to flow out through Manitoba and is going to end up in Hudson Bay, which is considered the Atlantic Ocean. Then a couple other lakes. Here's Cree Lake. This is a popular spot. This is dry. This is fly-in only. There's no roads to this one. And then Lac L'Orange, it's a little bit further south. It'd actually be in the central zone. But those are the biggest lakes in the region, and they are huge. They are very, very big, and big enough that I wanted to just put a safety note on them. That if you were looking to do a self-venture out onto those lakes, they're huge, and you can get into trouble in a hurry. And one of the things that they don't have is they all have topographic maps, but they're so remote that there's no hydrographic charts of any of these lakes, which is a challenge. So I guide on a lake that doesn't have depth charts. So when you're trying to, when you start guiding up in these areas, you're really relying on the other guides. Okay, there's a reef here, there's okay, this point comes out far, because there's no map reference for any of that. And it's really just time on the water to learn these places. There's some of these new fish finders have mapping capabilities, and we do that, but yeah, don't expect to go up to one of these big lakes or just about any lake up in that northern area and think, well, I'll find the depth chart for it. Especially coming from Southern Ontario, where everything's mapped. I mean, you could pull it up on a computer and go, okay, under that buoy, it's 8 feet deep. There's nothing like that. So it's really almost trial and error to some degrees. And a lot of the reefs that are on the lake that we know about where I guide, a lot of them are named after somebody, and it's named after the person that hit it, because that's how they found it. This is, one of the ones that's right by the lodge is Gord's Reef, because 30 years ago, a guy named Gord hit that reef. So that's his reef. And so it's just a little note about, about venturing up there. And okay, we're going to talk about just watersheds. There wasn't really a good publicly available map for this, but I thought it was still worth including. If you were sort of a river guy, or if I was looking to do, say, a canoe trip up in the area, you'd want to look at the major watersheds. And like I said, Wollaston is the largest bipurification lake in the world. And touch on that a bit more on this screen. So you have the Churchill River, and that's basically the southern boundary of the northern FMZ. In the Churchill River, it starts in Alberta and then empties out into the Atlantic, or Hudson Bay. The lake I'm on is fed by the Geeky River, and the Geeky River, you could argue, is the largest river in the world to naturally drain into two oceans, because it drains in, it's what feeds Wollaston. And so up in the northwest corner of Wollaston, we have the Fond du Lac, and that's a tributary of the Mackenzie. And so that drains out into the Arctic. And then up in the northeast corner, we have the Churchill, and that's what drains out to Hudson Bay. So it's largest lake of the world in the world of its kind, which is a natural bipurification lake. And then hence you could argue that the Geeky River is the largest river in the world to flow into two oceans. Cree River, there's some lodge there, but those are just a couple other names. And I thought it was worth noting here that when you think of the drainage of Saskatchewan as a whole, which is really right in the middle of Canada, it's almost right in the middle of the continent, but you have water that drains to the Arctic Ocean, you have water that drains to the Atlantic Ocean, and you also have water that ends up going into the Missouri River, which then goes into the Gulf of Mexico. So water that's in Saskatchewan travels pretty far. I mean, when you're talking about Saskatchewan, you don't necessarily think of the Gulf of Mexico as part of its drainage basin, but it is. So a couple of the southern creeks. Just thought that was worth
interesting. And so
including.
Obviously most of those rivers are massive. But how would you describe the fishing, or the types of fishing people would be getting into on some of the rivers up there? You've got these massive rivers, which I imagine probably have all those species that you've mentioned. Some of them might be more lakes than rivers in certain stretches. Do you have smaller rivers that are, what a lot of trout anglers might think of, or are these really just like, very large kind of northern rivers?
Well, so the one that drains out on the north east of Wollaston is the Cochrane River, and there are sections of that would remind me of almost the French River, if anybody knows. I mean, like, it's a big, wide, deep river, so you get a lot of pike, and so all the same species: pike, walleye, lake trout. I don't necessarily think of it as a grayling. There are grayling in there, but if I think of a grayling river, I'm thinking of a small, fast flowing river. You know, we were talking about the Saugeen. Like I live up near the Saugeen, and you think of like some of those little rocky pools, and they have a little bend and stuff like that. That's more sort of the grayling stuff. So if I was wanting to go to Saskatchewan to target grayling, you're looking at small rivers, smaller. If I was looking for pike and walleye, I'd want something a little bigger, generally speaking.
And maybe I'm jumping ahead, maybe you'll cover it later, but like if you're thinking of the grayling, typically, you know, fish you're gonna find going farther north, what kind of areas would people focus on for that kind
For
of
grayling?
Yeah.
Fast rapids, essentially.
And in terms of like area of the province?
Oh, north. Yeah, like the grayling, they're not down in the prairie areas. It's really grayling. I mean, they're called Arctic grayling for a reason. They're really up in the territories. Nunavut. I suspect Yukon has them. But they're northern fish. They do live down, I think, in Colorado. I think there's some, but I want to say, yeah, and I'm not sure if it's a different species, but they talk about that they live in England in the chalk streams. I know.
Yeah, Europe has a lot. I believe European grayling are actually a different species, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's the same one, but yeah, ours are the Arctic ones.
So would you say that as soon as you're north of the Churchill, you're in their territory, or do you have to go much further north than that?
That's a good question. I suspect that you are. I'm not sure what their southern boundary is.
Sure. I'm sure with a little research you could figure out if a specific watershed had them or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the line is. Like I know, like talking about watershed, like up in the northeast, as you get like almost right on the Northwest Territory border, there's a lodge up there called Casbah, and Casbah has a spot called Boundary Bay, which is right on. You could do a loop of that bay, and you could go from the Northwest Territories to Saskatchewan to Manitoba to Nunavut, and then back. And so that gives you an idea. And they have their pike, walleye, and grayling. Pike, lake trout, grayling. They don't have any walleye up there. I mean, I know that's one of the dividing lines for walleye, but I'm not sure the southern one for the grayling. But it's probably in around that Churchill River area.
That's fair. We had a question from Jim, just sticking with the grayling for a sec. Is there a good opportunity for dry fly fishing for them up there?
Yes, 110%. And that's generally the dry fly is your best option. Yeah, you could have some unbelievable days on a dry fly. Yeah, yes, lots of opportunity for dry flies. They get silly. Okay, yeah, so we'll talk about some fish species here, and this we can spend a little bit more time on, and especially I got a bit more on the pike here. So I mentioned earlier, this is just a little note, but there's about 21 species that are commonly sought, but there's 69 species of fish altogether in Saskatchewan. Just thought that was an interesting little thing. And they even say, you know, in their reg books, they say, you know, there's 47 species that, you know, you don't really have to worry about because nobody's going to catch them. But it might be worth, I just thought I'd add the note that it might be worth learning about those species, because the more you know about what the fish that you're targeting are eating and what their prey is and what their prey does, that helps you catch the fish that you're trying to catch. So it was just a sort of a funny note to see in the reg book that they say, you know, it's basically saying you only need to worry about these 21 species. Don't worry about the rest of these, but you might. It was just a little note on that. So again, you know, I've mentioned it before, but this is the lodge I work for, and this is our logo. So this sort of illustrates what the target species are, and this is what we call our Grand Slam. This is the Northern Grand Slam, is your pike, grayling, walleye, lake trout. And we have people come to the lodge to catch these 4 species, and we put their name on a plaque and it goes on a wall. And we might have, we have some years where, there might be a couple hundred people will go for that Grand Slam. And on the fly, and they can do it with conventional or spin, but lots of people do that on the fly rod. That's pretty cool. And then whitefish, and we're going to talk a little bit about whitefish. But yeah, that would be, those 4 species would be considered the Saskatchewan Grand Slam. Okay, now we can get into some pike. That's not such a bad looking pike on a fly right there. Saskatchewan, obviously home to world-class pike fishing, and pike love flies. Pike really love flies. I can't really stress that enough. And I think that pike are probably one of the best freshwater species for sight fishing. A lot of my guiding concentrates around visually going into a bay, something shallow and sandy, and spotting one and going, okay, there's a good one. And I'll have my guy at the front of the boat. Okay, big pike at 6 o'clock or 3 o'clock facing left. That's where I need a cast. And that's kind of how it's almost like flats fishing in salt water at times. I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of sand in the area, and that was one of the things that surprised me. But it definitely, having that sand and clear water is a pretty nice recipe for visuals and sight fishing in the pike world. And it's pretty cool. So I'll mention here, yeah, 40 inches considered trophy in most, and even in Southern Ontario here, 40 inch pike anywhere in the world is a nice fish. And the Saskatchewan record is 47.5 pounds and 55.5 inches. And that is huge. And I'm pretty sure, that's only about 6.5 pounds off the world record. I think the world record is Lohan from Germany, and I want to say it was 55 pounds. The biggest pike, the heaviest pike in the world are European, but we do grow them pretty long here. You're talking 55.5 inch pike. That's a lot of pike. And we see like this year, I think we had half a dozen fish over 50 inches. That's nothing wrong with that. Rods, so recommended rods for pike 8 to 11 is what I recommend, or what we generally use. I have some people, I have some guests that are a little older, might get tired. 8 weight, there's nothing wrong. You can handle a big fish on that. I have the odd guy might go, if you're throwing a great big honking beast fly or something like that, yeah, you might want an 11. But 9 and 10 is the range, and it's probably, you don't have to have it that big, and it might be a little overpowered for these fish, but it does help release them just to get them in a little bit quicker. If you want to, yeah, you can catch a great big fish on a 6 or 7 weight, but it starts to risk the fish's health. And so I'd tell the same people fishing in Ontario, like a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about when I'm talking to fishing here, you can apply. But yeah, 8, 9, 10 weight rods, that's going to cover pretty much anything you want to do. As far as your fly lines go, floating is the main one that I use. I probably run a floating line 80-90% of the time. Intermediate, probably as the season wears on a little later in the season, we'll throw some intermediates, or if the fish are just sitting a little deeper. Sinking line, I don't know that I've ever used a sinking line for pike up where I guide. I don't know that I've ever been in a situation where I've needed to, because you're so far north and it's a short season. You think Southern Ontario, those water temperatures are going to get up into the 80s in the summer. 80, you might see 85-degree water. We don't see that up where I am. 70, if you hit 70 degrees, 72 degrees, that's getting pretty warm. So some of these fish, they will go out deep and they're going to go out and eat some other things, but they're always accessible to catch 10 feet of water or less, so that you don't really have a need for a sinking line for most pike. Like I've just never had it. But if you were to run an intermediate and a float line, that should be all you really ever need up perennial, just about anywhere you fish pike. Wire leaders, wire titanium for sure. And you can do pre-made. I know Chris was talking, we talked a bit about that you guys sell pre-made wire leaders at the shop, and I have a lot of guys show up with them, and they're great. With the little clips on them, they're easy, they're interchangeable. Personally, for all the pike fishing I do, I just tie them. I do the mono. I go perfection loop to I run a uni to uni knot between the wire and my mono, and then I do a loop knot. And I just like that it's subtle, and those are the strengths. If I was running, say, a bunny leech or something where I want to slow down the sink rate, I don't want that fly coming down to the water column very quick, I'm going to run that 20. Like 20 is sort of subtle, and I fish, I'm fishing in gin clear water, gin clear water. And some of these fish, they can get a little pressured up, and I don't generally find that they're leader shy. Some people think, okay, I got to run fluorocarbon. To me, it's just a risk. And I think you almost need to get up into that 80 to 100-pound fluorocarbon range. I would before I'm really comfortable with it. So I just stick to 20-pound multi-strand wire, but there's nothing wrong with buying the pre-made ones.
And do you have an opinion as well? Like, I agree. I think generally probably at least 60-pound before, or it could take fish of that size. Do you have an opinion like visibility versus action on the fly? Because I find for myself, like I always get better motion out of wire when I'm fishing. It's just a little softer and it lets fly move more freely than fluoro. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Because it's a trade. The difference between wire and fluorocarbon, like the wire is so thin, and I think that's knittage. Just in terms of the action, I think the flies do move better to get to a point where you don't have to stress about getting bitten off using fluorocarbon. You're going up to such a thick diameter that it really does start to impact the action of that fly. And I think it can get to a point where it becomes almost detrimental to the action. So it's sort of it kind of counteracts itself. It's like, yeah, it's clear, but the action isn't quite the same. Like to me, I don't really worry about pike being leader shy. If a pike isn't eating the fly that my client is presenting to it, it's more likely because the action you're imparting or the fly itself. It's rarely, in my opinion, a leader issue. I just don't think it's really, and that's in clear water pressured fish. Yeah. If you present it well and you present the right fly with wire, they're going to bite it, unless they're just not hungry.
Yeah, no, I would generally agree. And did you say, sir, on your leader build, how long the total leader is and how long your wire is?
Oh yeah, I'd say, if I'm running bait fish flies, they're not very long, because I don't know, 4 feet. I mean, I kind of take my spool, I give it a good arm reach, and I probably cut more off. So yeah, maybe 4 feet, 4.5 feet of mono to 16. And I make the wire a little bit longer. I might run 16 to 18 inches, but that's because I tie direct. And I'm gonna cut it off a couple times. And then once you get down to about, you start getting under 12 inches, you get to 10 inches. If there's big pike around, that makes me nervous. Because if a big fish that if they inhale that thing, they might bite past. And I have seen the odd pike bite past the leader if it's too short. So yeah, keep it a little bit longer for sure. But yeah, perfection loop, uni to uni, loop knot, and definitely loop knots with the wire. I don't do a cinch knot, because it does, that will inhibit the action a little bit. It's very stiff. Like the fly will kind of follow the leader like this. You know, if the leader goes here, the fly can just be rigid, versus with a loop knot, it just has a nice flow to it. So that to me is important, is the loop knot connection to the fly.
Right on.
Tools, and again, you know, this, you use the same thing here. You know, for where I am, we can catch large pike. We can catch them multiple times in a season. The biggest pike I've ever handled in my boat is a 49-incher, and it was caught the next year almost to the day at 50 inches. But you know, if I hadn't handled that fish well and released it right, it's not getting caught the next year. So it's a big stress to handle these fish with respect and put them back. But yeah, so just some of the tools, needle nose pliers. Most of them I think are about 11-inch now, and you can get big hemostats like that. Some of the guides I worked with, like the hook outs. If you know a hook out, they kind of have a handle, like they're kind of shaped like this.
Yeah,
I'm not as big on the hook outs myself. I just like the pliers.
Something
get a bit,
long.
yeah, you just need something long, so that if something needs it, you can get down in there. But hook cutters, you really should always have hook cutters in the boat, especially if you're using thick gauge hooks, just about anywhere. Like, I mean, that's a musky thing, but yeah, hook cutters are just always a good idea. Or what, you know, even if you're fishing small little flies, just, you never know when you need them, and you don't want to need them and be without them. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and even with barbless hooks, like you just get them in a sensitive area or something, you might be better off cutting it, right?
Yeah.
Or if you know, you're out in a remote area and somehow you hook yourself, it could come in handy too, right?
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, we had a guide this year. He got a hook down in his hand, and he couldn't get it. Like, I mean, he did it, and he's out in the middle of nowhere, and he tried everything he could. He couldn't get it out.
Yeah.
And I think he had to come back to the lodge, and they eventually somebody either yanked it out or they cut it out. But yeah, you don't want to be in a situation, and I have been in a situation where I needed hook cutters, and I didn't have them. And I mean, that's a long time ago now, but yeah, you don't want to learn your lesson the hard way on that one. So just take that little piece of advice I would suggest. Jaw spreaders. Some people have mixed opinions on jaw spreaders. Personally, I think they're very important, especially for the fly fishing. I might handle a couple thousand pike a season, and I might only, you know, I might use them less than a dozen times. But with flies, you know, you think of how many teeth a pike has, and sometimes you're trying to get that fly out of there, and the pike just doesn't want to open its mouth. And if you're kind of rip that fly, you can leave a lot of material in there. You're gonna damage your fly, but you can leave like synthetic materials in a fish's mouth that can harm it. You know, that you kind of don't want to do that. But I carry a couple sets. I'll carry some that spread quite wide, and then some that spread narrow, and I have them close to me. So if I have a big fish, I grab the big ones. If I have a small fish and I need them, I grab the small ones, because you don't want to catch a little 25-inch pike and put a jaw spread in its mouth, you know, that opens like this. You're going to hurt the fish. So don't do that. Just carry a couple, and you can. A lot of times I might have the same ones, and I'll just put a little electrical tape around it to adjust the jaw angle. Bump board, you know, if you want to measure them, bump boards are pretty popular these days. 60-inch soft tapes or measuring sticks. Like, we don't weigh pike where I am. That's sort of one difference between Europe and North America. Europe, when they talk pike, it's all weight. North America, it's, for the most part, it's all inches. But you know, the guides, we measure them, we don't weigh them.
Yeah. Less handling time that way too, right?
Yeah, just you get them in quick, you know, put them on a board. Okay, that's the length. And you know, you can land that fish, unhook it, measure it, photograph it and have it back in the water. And you're really trying to do that in 45 seconds or less, probably under a minute. For a big one. I mean, the little one, the little pike, it's just grab him, hooks out, off he goes, you know. But we just sort of try and limit the handling as much as we can. We land all our fish by hand. I'll land a few each year, a big pike in a net, but some nets you can split the fins. Like if you have big hoops, you can split the tail fins. That's one of the reasons we don't net them. But I don't necessarily suggest that for everybody. If you're uncomfortable with them or you're unsure, a big net, just put them in there, and you know, it acts like a big live well basically, and then you can take your time, get everything ready. It's different when you have a guide doing it for you. You know, I have somebody fighting the fish and I go down, grab it, hooks out, measure, picture, in she goes. And we actually, when an angler is, and that's something I talk about with my guests, is that I say before we ever throw a line, is that if somebody hooks a big fish, the second angler sits down, I have them put their rod away and they get the camera out. Like I have everything ready before that fish gets to the boat, but that's landing it by hand. Yeah, but we just do everything we can to minimize the handling time.
Yeah, that's great. Especially when you consider that, you know, the 24-inch pike took 10 years. Who knows how long the 50 inchers taken, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you're talking like an upper 40-inch fish. That's a 25+ year old fish.
Yeah.
It's probably not far off your age. You're a young guy. I mean, I have had, you know, I've had teenagers. I've had guys catching fish that are pike that are older than they are. 100%.
Yeah.
Pretty kind of mind blowing when you think about it. So pike forage base, suckers, the main one. I put it twice for a reason. Suckers are the main forage. I'll say it again, suckers are the main forage. Probably I catch quite a high number of pike each season with tails in their mouth. And I'd say probably 90% of the time it's going to be a big sucker. Sometimes a burbot, whitefish, lake trout, smaller pike, you know, it can be any of those things. Leeches, I don't know what it is about leeches, but big pike love them. I don't know what it is about them. Maybe they're high in nutrients or they like the taste. But if you're thinking of fly patterns, I don't know, they just like big leeches. But by far and away, the pike's main forage is going to be a sucker. That's
So
just
would you
what
say
it is.
that's pretty well right across the province? That's
Yeah.
the go.
Yeah, and I'd say that applies to Ontario too. Yeah, they'll eat anything. They'll eat anything they can get their jaws around, but they really like soft finned species. Suckers are high nutrient form. They're easy. I mean, you look at a whitefish or a lake trout or perch. I mean, these are pretty zippy. Suckers are just sort of like dum. You know, they kind of take their time swimming around, and I've seen schools of them in the thousands. I mean, we get up in these float planes and you fly over these sandy areas, and you almost can't see the bottom in places because there's thousands and thousands of suckers. And the pike are right in, and the pike just follow along with them. It's a big, easy meal. They don't have to put a lot of energy into it. But yeah, I'd say 90% of the time, if I catch a pike with something in its belly, it's going to be a sucker. But they'll eat anything. Cisco, shiners, doesn't matter. But suckers is what is your main focus for sure. Pike flies. Pike aren't too picky most of the time. They can be, but I mean that's actually my fly box right there. One of them gives you a bit of a sense of some of the flies that I use. But bait fish flies, I had one of these. Showing Chris, but you know that there's a little chartreuse and white bait fish. I've used that for quite a bit of the season this year, and catch, I don't know, I've caught 4-foot pike on those. Whistlers, deceivers, bunny leeches, I've said. But this past season, I probably threw maybe 4 flies most of the time. I'd throw a bait fish, a bunny leech, a monster, and I'm calling a monster magic, just something in that synthetic fly in that 12-inch range. That would sort of imitate a sucker or has the profile of a big meal, like a walleye or something going by. Sea deucers, that was a really good one for me this year. Yellow and red. That's the yellow and red's a big one. But probably one of the most important notes, I would say, like I'm a big fan of black, but I'm also a really big fan of flies you can see. The fly, if I can have a client make a 50 or 70-foot cast, and I can see the little chartreuse back of a bait fish, we're probably going to it'll be good, because I tell all my clients, if that fly disappears, you set the hook. So I'm a big fan of highly visual flies. And I can, but it can change. I think of one day this year where we started off in the morning and had the owner of the lodge with me, and we started off in the morning. It was really sunny, flat, calm, and we're fishing clear water. The pike were okay, they weren't hammering, but they were doing all right. We were catching them, and I had them throwing a very natural bait fish. Just, I think it was a gray back and a white belly, and we were just sort of doing some sight fishing, calm, clear, no wind in the morning. And then in the afternoon, the weather switched, and then clouds rolled in, and the wind really picked up, and all of a sudden you couldn't see this little bait fish anymore. And I picked, and we went sort of completely 180 from a very natural minnow sort of thing, fishing up shallow, picking these fish off, to we went to about a 12-inch black and fluorescent orange fly. And wind picked up, and we just started fishing wind-blown shorelines and just ripping these flies. And they'd cast them out and just strip them in as fast as they could. And I don't know, we caught 4 or 5 over 40 inches pretty quick. But it was just sort of one of those days where it went from, a little natural thing to something, fishing a little slower, to something very big, fast trips and very aggressive. And that's all in one day. So there's quite a range. And it does pay to change around things a little bit. So I've got just a few notes. I think it's important to have a range of sink rates, slow sinking flies. And that's, I think, where the bunny leech comes in, is that slow sink rate. If you get into an area where the pike are lethargic and they're not moving, that slow sink rate can be the killer. That can be the deal. You just need something that can hover there, and they're going to look at it and just twitch, hover, twitch. If they're aggressive, you want something going, make them chase it. People always say, oh, pike will eat anything. A lot of the time they will, but they can be as frustrating as any other fish. And if you're getting rejections, you just got to keep trying. But I mean, I don't use guiding. I don't generally use a wide range of flies, just because I kind of have a group that I know that works. Like I say, a bait fish, a bunny leech, a whistler, a couple of things. And I rely on those pretty heavy, but some days those aren't work. And then you got to just experiment with the box. But not sure what the last note here was that I made. I can't move that. Oh yeah, with the high visibility, it's just if you can't see the fly, if the fly disappears, set the hook. But yeah, I do like those highly visible flies. So we'll talk a little bit about the pike seasonal movements, and this isn't necessarily just to Saskatchewan. This could be anywhere. Obviously, as soon as the ice comes off for season opener, like I was always a big fan. My favorite time of year to fish pike in Ontario has always been the May 2-4 opening day. And because you're just going to go out and seek out the warmest water, the shallowest bays, incoming water. And And then as that water starts to warm, you progress into early summer here, you might start to get a little bit of weeds growing up on some of those, just on the edge of some of the sandy bays. They're going to sort of transition here, transition out from the real shallows. And then you have midsummer as a transition period. And the deep weeds up where I am will start to develop, but not there. Those pike just don't go all the way out there, and transition can be a little tough, but I don't know, I kind of like it. But they're not quite out in those deep weeds. They're not all out there, and some fish are still in the shallow bays, and you kind of got to look a little bit more. Like right out of the gate in the spring, it's pretty reliable. You kind of know where they're going to be. As soon as the weeds start to develop, you can kind of have an idea, but that transition time can be a little tricky. And then up in northern Saskatchewan by say August, you're fishing cabbage. That's your whole day is you just go from one cabbage bed to the next cabbage bed to the next one to the next one to the next one. And you just fish almost as many cabbage beds as you can in a day, and you just try and find the ones where the fish are. And they might be in one day and they're gone the next. But and I would say that from an aspect of a fly angler, I probably like, the spring obviously is probably my favorite as a fly fisherman. Transition, I actually kind of like the transition. Cabbage season can present a challenge to fly anglers. The main reason is if you're fishing in heavy weeds and you hook a big fish, the fly line doesn't cut through the weeds, it curls around it. And so you can hook a fish and it shoots off through that weed bed and around a corner, and your line is just following the track of that fish. And especially with the barbless hooks, a lot of people will tend to lose them. So late season, yeah, it's about big fish, but it does come with a bit of a challenge of weeds. If you're not super experienced, I might avoid that a little bit. That would just be my note on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, you've got laid out sort of spring, early midsummer, and early fall. If we're thinking of Saskatchewan seasons, and you're just saying people should maybe focus if they're looking to do it on the fly at earlier season, what would you say is that earlier season?
Well, yeah. So our season starts June 9th.
Yeah.
And we go to August 22nd. Like June, July is good. For whatever reason, some of my biggest fish probably come in early August, which is kind of still in transition. I don't know, just the last bunch of years, my biggest fish of the season has come from early August, late June, or late July. Like if you're fishing like early June, yeah, your numbers, you can have 100 fish days. I'll have a couple hundred fish pike days on the fly rod at some point. But by August, your overall numbers are generally lower, but your average size can be bigger. I can think of I've had several days in late August where I've probably caught less than 10 fish. I can think of days I've had 9 pike in the boat all day, but 6 of them are over 40 inches.
Sure.
It's sort of, yeah. So spring, yeah, I think your overall numbers will be higher. And it's easier. You don't have to deal with the weeds, but your average size later in the year is probably bigger.
Yep. Cool.
I was considering when to go. So that's sort of the pikes. I don't know if there's any questions on the pike stuff, but
I think you covered it great. But if anyone has questions, feel free to put that in the chat. We'll come back to it.
Yeah. So walleye, there's, and here's a walleye that ate one of those chartreuse bait fish. Saskatchewan has some pretty big walleye down south, like Tobin Lake. So that's the Saskatchewan record. Is 18.5 pounds. 36.5 inch walleye blows my mind. I don't even know what that looks like, to be honest. It's crazy. But those are down in the prairies. Upper IM, we have great numbers, but you're not gonna catch a 30-inch walleye, or, you know, it'd be very rare. I mean, in 13 years, I think I can think of maybe 1 or 2 30-inch walleye that have come out where I am. But we have some fly out lakes, you know, some of those small lakes. I mean, you get 100+ walleye days, you know, that's not uncommon. And you catch a lot of those 25, 26, 27-inch walleye. That's really, those are kind of common. You're just not going to get a 30-incher, but you catch a lot of nice walleye.
Yeah, those are quality fish.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And as far as the flies go, I mean, I don't really have a separate, I don't have a separate walleye box of flies. I really just use my pike box. I might have a few more, I might lean more on some clousers, you know, but bait fish, flies, deceivers are good. I'm a big fan of that clouser though, or half and half. Nothing too special. You don't need wire leaders with them. But it is, especially if you're going to fish Saskatchewan, I would probably just keep, they're not leader shy. And quite often when you're in catching, if you get into a school of walleye, there's probably going to be a big pike not far behind them. They are a food source. So you don't really have to worry about, you know, are they going to see the wire leader? You're going to be in a giant school of them probably, and they're not going to care. And you're better off to keep that wire on there for when that 40+ inch pike comes out of nowhere and eats it. That'd be my suggestion. Rivers, you know, you're fishing rivers, rocky shorelines, so similar sort of stuff as to what you'd be fishing here. Floating and intermediate lines, for sure. You may come into a need for a sinking line here and there, but again, a lot of these fish, you know, when we're contacting them in 10 feet of water or less, 15 feet of water or less. You're not needing to go sinking stuff 20 feet down. They're pretty abundant, and if you get into a school, you know, you're going to find a school of 50 of them, and you know, you'll do just fine. And I did have to note, I mean, talking about walleye, deep fried walleye or walleye cheeks with garlic butter. I do like, I'm a big catch and release guy, but I also like my short lunch. There's something to be said for some nice walleye. But yeah, 6 to 8 weight rods, but it's not uncommon where I'm guiding. I don't generally spend a whole day trying to target walleye with most of my anglers. We're just gonna go try and catch a couple for shore lunch, and we'll just do it with the pike rods. Same flies, same setup. So, but very, very good walleye fishing out there.
Yeah, nice break from the pike.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Lakers. So again, biggest lake trout ever recorded is out of Athabasca. Oh, I can't see myself now. Oh shoot.
All looks good on this side.
Okay, good. I'm not the most technical guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the trout are catchable pretty much all season long up where I am. You know, you're gonna catch them again on pretty similar to the pike stuff, but it's so cold. Those pike will be, or the trout will be roaming up in the pike bays in the spring too. I mean, it's not uncommon that you go pike, lake trout, pike. I mean, because it's cold water and they can be anywhere. And you can, oh God, there are some big lake trout in northern Saskatchewan. I mean, it produces a 100-pounder. So, I mean, we're going to fish them on rocky shorelines and points, sand flats. Again, that sand is really central to a lot of things in Saskatchewan. There's just a lot of sand in that area, and a lot of fish relate to it in different ways. But there's a nice lake trout on the fly. And here's just some notes on them. Here's what I think is the most important aspect of targeting lake trout on a fly is your strip speed. When I started guiding out there, you know, you think of a cadence that you might use for a pike, which is, you know, strip, and you might have a pause in there. And when I was trying to guide guys to catching the lake trout, we were sort of doing that, and we would struggle. And you'll see that the lake trout will come up to the fly, they might nudge it, and they'll look at it. But if you're throwing a lot of like long pauses in there, for whatever reason, they just don't tend to bite it. And my success rate with clients really turned around when I just tell my guys, look, we're going to cast a sinking line. We're going to cast a clouser or, something with some lead, sink it way down. And I'll tell them to strip it as fast as you can back to the boat, or just make it a constant strip. And they get bit. And I don't know why that is, but that's probably the most crucial tip that I explain to my guests while guiding. And we can have some pretty reliable lake trout fishing on the fly. I mean, I can pull up to just about any rocky point that projects into the main basin of the lake and expect to catch a couple lake trout on a fly rod. But if you do a slow pause strip, they don't eat it, at least in my experience. But yeah, fast strips, hops, you just keep whatever it is, you keep the fly moving. And I would suspect that would apply to the lake trout here in Ontario too. That's just a big thing. You don't, a couple of notes, you don't need wire leaders. You could run your fluorocarbon with them. The clousers, Dalai Lamas, I've done really well on Dalai Lamas over the years. And I'd probably keep it pretty natural colors, minnow patterns, suckers, burbot, that's what they're eating. Intermediate and sink, you could catch a lake trout on a float line, and I have caught them on a float line, but you're pretty much always going to run an intermediate or a sink. And I would probably run a sink 90% of the time for them.
Well, that would help too if you're retrieving it as quickly as you describe, right? Just
keeps it down in that zone. And I did put a note that some people, I have some guys, they've caught, maybe spent a few days, maybe their arms are getting a little tired, but I have some guys that are not opposed to trolling a fly with a fly rod. And sometimes we do it and just catch a few fish. The only tip I would say, it's sacrilegious to some guy, I have some guys that would never admit that they do it, but they always want to go do it with me. But they just say, don't tell anybody I'm trolling the fly rod up here. And I go, okay, I won't tell anybody. but it's fun. But the one note I would say about that is, if you ever want to try and catch a lake trout on a fly with trolling a fly, if you go in a straight line, you really don't get bit. Pretty much as soon as you turn the boat, I don't know, for whatever reason, as soon as that fly sort of makes a turn, they bite it.
Yeah.
That's just.
I know. Our friend Alex has worked at the shop in the past, and he's a guide, or has been at Plumbers in past years on Great Bear.
Yeah.
They always say, if you want numbers of lake trout, you can cast for them all day, but if you really want trophy fish, then they always go trolling, because they find that the amount of distance that these fish will follow the fly is sometimes insanely long. They're guessing, at least, and so they get big fish when they troll, and they get smaller fish when they cast, they find.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's remarkable. I mean, people have put cameras down. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's such a high population of trout, but if you're trolling for them, they say there's almost always a trout following your bait.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're getting bit, but there's almost, and they will stay with it for a mile. But yeah. It's pretty wild.
Hard to make a cast that long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't do it. But it's funny, every once in a while we're up, we're fishing a weed bed. Like, I'll have a guy casting for pike at weeds, and every once in a while, like a 36-inch lake trout shows up out of the weed bed, and I don't know why, but I enjoy it when it happens. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. So as far as timing of lake trout, and for that matter, walleye, we didn't really touch on that. So, you'd say probably earlier season, like you say, you can get them anytime, but earlier season is probably your top for lake trout. Yeah.
Like our June, July is pretty reliable. If I wanted to catch a big lake trout, I might time it around a full moon any month. But by August, they do tend to go deep, and considering we're talking about fly fishing, August probably wouldn't be the greatest month for them, because they can really stack up in deep hole. They might go 50 feet down, 60 feet down in numbers. I mean, you can still catch them shallow, but not in the, if I wanted to go and catch a whole pile of lake trout on a fly rod, yeah, it'd be June or July for sure.
Cool. And walleye, I'd say pretty steady through the season.
Yeah, pretty steady. Yeah, they're kind of good all year.
Yeah, cool.
I haven't really noticed, one season to the next being particularly good. There's just a lot of them, and it's kind of always good for them. Seems to be. Okay, grayling. Geez. So yeah, the Saskatchewan record grayling is 4.5 pounds, and I want to say the world record's at a Great Bear, and it might be, I think it's just under 5.5 pounds. So the biggest ones are up in the territories, but Saskatchewan has some excellent grayling fishing. They are stunningly beautiful fish. They are very strong jump. They just jump like crazy. The one special note I would say is that of any species I've handled around the world, grayling are probably the most difficult to handle. They're really, if you overhandle them, you will kill them. Or if you squeeze them too hard, they really don't stop wiggling. They're slippery. They're kind of little buggers in that way. And I generally will tell my clients, and we can catch a number in a day, but I'll tell them we're going to take a picture of one grayling. And we'll catch, we get maybe a 15 or 16-inch grayling. We're going to take that, we're going to do a photo with that one. And that'll be the only fish we handle all day. All the other ones, I'm going to put them in the net, take the fly out, and just release them in the water. And we really limit the handling of these fish. You could wear a cotton glove, or you take pictures in the net, but that's just my general opinion on it. Most of the guys that I guide with, that grayling you got to be very, very gentle with them. But they're a lot of fun. But yeah, you really they don't do well with overhandling. And just so limit the photographs with them. Your gear, floating lines, 4 to 6 weight rods, 2 to 4x tippet. Somebody was asking about dry flies. I think dry flies are sometimes the best option for them. You just get into some fast moving water. Geez, I mean, I've had a day. There's one day I had a day off, and me and one of the other guides went out, and we stood shoulder to shoulder. I don't know. I mean, in under 40 minutes, I think I had 35 and he had 36 or something like that, standing right, all on dry flies, just fishing this just one after the other. They really don't see a lot of pressure up there, and they're pretty aggressive. I mean, you might relate them to like a brook trout. Like a brook trout they're pretty aggressive little fish in streams, compared to some other species, or smallmouth or something like something goes by them. If you can get it in front of them, they generally eat it. They're pretty fun that way. If you get on them, you're going to catch them if you find them. At least in my experience up in Saskatchewan. But in terms of, like, I had one of the biggest ones. I think I had the biggest one at the lodge this year. I had a 19-incher. It was a 19.5-incher in the boat. So they're not monstrous, but they are a lot of fun. And they're probably one of the most beautiful fish that you'll ever come across. And so there's a few, so mayfly imitations, stoneflies, but there's a list. They're not super picky. Just get a fly in front of them, they'll probably bite it. And whitefish, I wanted to talk about them a little bit. So 11.8 pounds is the Saskatchewan record. We don't see them that big up where I am. But there's my buddy Matt with a nice one. And that's pretty, and you can actually see there, he's in a river there that you'd be fishing grayling. That's a grayling river behind him. And he just caught a nice whitefish. I wouldn't go out of my way to go to Saskatchewan to catch a whitefish on the fly, but if I was going there, they should definitely be on your radar. They're really plentiful. And it's really common that when I've got clients and we're up in these sandy pike bays, there's almost always whitefish just cruising around, just about everywhere. And they're pretty strong. And I always tell my guys, I call that the northern bonefish. And I try and sell them on a little bit. But if, say if the pike aren't biting or the wall, if you're struggling a little bit, the whitefish can be a really nice fallback fish. And if you brought your grayling gear, it's all the exact same gear. They're strong fighters. They make good runs. You catch a grayling or a whitefish like that on a 5 weight, you're gonna have a lot of fun. Like I said, I wouldn't go out of my way to go to Saskatchewan to catch them, but they are very plentiful and definitely worth knowing that they're there. And they really like to fly for sure. Any questions on the fish stuff?
No, I think that's great. And again, seasons, whitefish and grayling pretty well season round.
Yep. Yeah, see, all season long. Yeah, the whitefish, they're just always around. The grayling, they're probably a little bit later. Because right after ice, well, yeah, like our numbers are probably a little bit lower after ice out, and I'd say we do a little better with them midsummer, just a little bit later.
Yep.
I right off the hop there when it's a little colder, they're a little slower. Sure. But they gotta warm up a little bit. So midsummer is sort of what I find when you got a lot of bugs in the air and hatches happening. That cool. seems to be good for me. Travel and accommodation. So I'm just going to talk about some of the options that there are. If you were looking to do self-venture, I showed you the map earlier. There's a few roads up into that area. They are very rugged. Where I am we're 500, 600 kilometers from pavement where I work. There's a road, but getting there, it's sort of you blow a tire or something like that, you're in trouble, but it is doable. There's lots of campgrounds throughout the whole area. There's lots of little lakes. You could certainly put a canoe on the top of your car and go for it. You've got 100,000 lakes and rivers up there, so there's no shortage of places to go fish. If you're the adventurous type and you're younger and you want to go for it, you certainly have sort of the information you need and the rods and stuff that you need in this presentation, and go for it. But you just have to be aware that there aren't emergency services. There's probably not communication up in that area. So things can go sideways in a hurry. I mean, I made a note about the big lakes and safety. Go for it, but it's not like going to Algonquin Park or something here where, there are people around. You could be up in an area and you might not see somebody for days. So that's anywhere. And a lot of people like that, and myself included. It's nice to get away, but just a few notes that it is doable up there. Outpost camps. So there's lots of lodges offer outpost camps where they might fly you into a little remote lake. They're generally a little cheaper. You're not going to be guided, but you cook and clean for yourself. And these are throughout Ontario too. These are all over Canada, little outpost camp lodges. And you might just have an entire lake to yourself. Group of guys, you go in, you can have a lot of fun. Outpost camps, nice, cheaper option. And I looked it up, and there's probably more, but looking up in Saskatchewan, there's about 18 lodges offering outpost camps through this one organization that I'll mention a little later. But but those are a nice, cheap, cheerful option. And then you got the full-on American plan lodges, like where I work. There's a picture of Wollaston Lake Lodge there. So I mean, they're nice. They're everything's included. Your food, your fuel. Our guests fly in and out of Winnipeg. So our guests arrive in Winnipeg, and there's a hotel included in the stay. Fully guided trips. And we have we're pretty prepared for any sort of medical emergencies. We have people that can come in and extract our guests if something were to happen. We have float planes, so you know, the American Plan lodges do eliminate a lot of the hassle, but they are the most expensive option. But so it's a bit of a trade-off, but it's pretty nice. I mean, you're talking about guides with 20, 30 years experience on these bodies of water, and that's a pretty nice asset to have. And again, yeah, there's probably about 30 lodges up in Saskatchewan, at least 30 lodges. And then the last note here is there are 2 Orvis endorsed lodges, and if you're aware of it, Orvis is a big fly fishing company. And there's about 20 Orvis endorsed lodges in Canada, and there's 2 in Saskatchewan. Where I work is Wollaston Lake Lodge, and we have won the Fly Fishing Lodge of the Year. So they proclaimed us the best fly fishing lodge anywhere in their program, which is a pretty big honor. And that's an award that we're quite proud of. We put a fly rod in every boat that's free to use. I mean, we have an H3 in every boat, so that's pretty nice. And we the lodge owners, they do a lot of work. I mean, they produce the common thread. So they put out films, and we're working with fisheries biologists. We do a tracking program on these big pike where we look at the photographs and we look at markings, and we're tracking these fish over years. And then the second one is Scott Lake Lodge, and they have they're up on the Northwest Territory border, and they have over 1 million acres of basically private water because there isn't a road to get into them. And I got some friends that work there. They're 20+ year guides. They got a really high customer return rate. But those were just the 2 lodges I thought were worth mentioning because they're the only 2 lodges that have that particular distinction in Saskatchewan. Yeah, so we're just getting to the end here. And these are just a few of the sources I used. And this is all public information for the most part. So you got the Saskatchewan Commission of Professional Outfitters. If you were looking to go to Saskatchewan and you were wanting to find a lodge, the Saskatchewan Commission of Professional Outfitters, or spco.ca, is an excellent resource. So I could go to that website and say I want to fish in northern Saskatchewan, I want to fish here or there, or I want to target grayling, I want to target pike, and they break it all down. Or I want to do an outpost camp. They have a high number of lodges, and they make it really easy for you, that if you have something in mind of what you want to go and target and do, that's a really good resource for you. So that's probably, if I was looking for a lodge, that's probably where I would start. But yeah, so I used Tourism Saskatchewan. I used the government regs, they're available online. And just a special thanks to Wollaston Lake Lodge, obviously where I work. And we are hiring. If I was a young guy looking to have a pretty awesome summer job, we are hiring. And I also want to thank Chip Cromarty, who's he's a 30-year veteran guide up in northern Saskatchewan. He's helped me out with this presentation. And then a couple of my buddies that I work with who did some photos. And then the last photo, this is my last page. And this is a picture of the Northern Lights, and that is taken off the dock of our lodge. And
Nice plus.
Yeah, that's a big plus. If you were to go to northern Saskatchewan around the summer solstice, you're not going to see any Northern Lights. You're going to have pretty much 24 hours of daylight. But if you were to come up getting into August, but from about the latter half of August on, you get a clear night. That's what you're going to see right there. There's some pretty incredible Northern Lights. And these Northern Lights go from it's a big sky, but I can stand on that dock and from one horizon over my head to the backside. And so yeah, if you wanted to see some mind-blowing Northern Lights, then head to Saskatchewan in late August.
That's
and
great.
There you go. That's my presentation. Hopefully
That's great. We can't thank you enough for that. It was fantastic. Your experience definitely shows there. And as mentioned, for anyone interested, Andrew's going to be doing a couple of follow-on talks, one streamed and then one in the shop later in March, tying some of his favorite pike flies that are producers at the lodge, and also I definitely know work great around here too. So that may be worth checking out for anyone here who is a fly tire. So yeah, thanks again, Andrew. That was wicked. If somebody wanted more info about the lodge, or I guess you dropped your email on there. Yeah, you've got your website as well, pikeandthefly.com. I know some great resources there. So for sure.
Feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help somebody out with fly fishing. Don't be shy.
Wicked. And of course, we've got everything you need to get planning a trip yourself in the shop too.